Breast cancer is the second most commonly diagnosed cancer in Australia. 1 in 7 women will be diagnosed in their lifetime. And 9 Australians still die from breast cancer every day. At the National Breast Cancer Foundation, we're determined to create a better tomorrow for all those who are affected. Our mission is simple: stop deaths from breast cancer. How? By identifying, funding and championing world-class research. Research that will help us detect tumours earlier, improve treatment outcomes and ultimately save lives. The National Breast Cancer Foundation is Australia's leading national body, funding game-changing breast cancer research with money raised entirely by the Australian public. We receive no government funding. What we do would not be possible without the continued support of people like you. Since 1994, we've awarded nearly $200 million to around 600 Australian-based research projects. These projects explore promising areas of investigation, from prevention and risk to early detection, personalised treatments, immunotherapy, and improved quality of life. Since we started funding research, the 5-year survival rates have improved from 76% to 92% and rising. It's progress to be proud of, but the job's not done. We pledge to keep problem solving, so future generations of Australians can live in a world where there are no deaths from breast cancer. Our determined vision is 0 deaths from breast cancer. The more we research, the sooner we'll get there. What we do today will echo down the generations. Together, we can beat breast cancer.
Samantha, welcome to the Impact Leaders webinar. Thank you for joining us here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeremy. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for everyone for listening in.
I'm just noticing my background. I'm actually at the office of one of our retail partners at the moment, and so hence there's all these mannequins around, and which is really symbolic of what we do, where we make it simple for some incredible brands around Australia to give back through the technology that we've built. I've been excited for this call because the National Breast Cancer Foundation has been around for a long time and doing obviously a lot of extraordinary work for women across Australia. And yet I think I'm really excited to jump in and understand more about the research and the work that you do. So over to you. What does the National Breast Cancer Foundation do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so thank you so much again for the opportunity, and thank you again for your support of National Breast Cancer Foundation. The National Breast Cancer Foundation is Australia's leading not-for-profit funder of world-class breast cancer research towards our very clear and ambitious vision of 0 deaths from breast cancer. And put simply, the reason why we do that is because breast cancer is the second most commonly diagnosed cancer among Australians, including around 200 men, which some of your listeners might find surprising. So obviously it's a disease that's most commonly diagnosed in females, but for over 20,000 women and around 200 men, breast cancer is unfortunately a burden that they have to face in Australia each and every year. And since 1994, we have invested over $216 million towards 622 world-class medical research projects that really understand prevention and risk so that we can hopefully stop breast cancer from developing, to better detection methods and new and improved treatments for those really hard to treat breast cancers. And the reason why we do this is because we know research saves lives. Over the past close to 30 years now since our inception, we've seen the mortality rate from breast cancer improve by over 40%, which is extraordinary, and it's progress to be incredibly proud of. So we now know for about 7 in 10 patients who are diagnosed with breast cancer, they'll live long and happy, healthy lives. And that's thanks to revolutionary advancements that we've seen through research and new and improved treatments. But unfortunately, we unfortunately, we'll still see around 3 in 10 patients who will either be diagnosed with or develop a really hard to treat breast cancer. And this includes breast cancer that spreads to other organs and becomes metastatic. We don't have good treatments for these types of breast cancers. And we absolutely desperately need new treatments. And so the National Breast Cancer Foundation's clear focus is to invest in world-class research so we can find these revolutionary treatments for these hard to treat breast cancers. I'm sorry, Jeremy, you're on mute.
What inspired you to work for the National Breast Cancer Foundation?
Look, breast cancer's I've been touched by breast cancer ever since I was 9 years old. I lost my auntie to the disease when I was 9, at a time, and this is many, many years ago, at a time when no one really knew much about breast cancer. My auntie was diagnosed with a breast cancer that at the time was emerging from her breast, had spread horribly throughout her body, and unfortunately she lost her battle with breast cancer very, very rapidly. Experiencing that as a 9-year-old child, I realized I needed to do something to stop people going through the suffering that I saw my auntie go through, as well as the suffering that my family and my father, whose sister was dying of breast cancer. So I committed my life to breast cancer research. So when I left school, I went straight into university and I studied medical research. I focused my entire career on medical research, and I've been fortunate to be the recipient of National Breast Cancer Foundation funding since I started my scientific career. So I was a breast cancer researcher for 20 years, and I have made some great discoveries that I'm very, very proud of. But after about 20 years, I realized that I really wanted to do more. Obviously, I could focus on my own little bits of research, but in my role as Director of Research Investment, I can now oversee and facilitate our world-class medical research schemes that make an impact on many, many more individuals in breast cancer research. And that's why I took the role of Director of Research Investment. It's not my role to pick and choose the grants that get funded. It's my role to run our absolute rigorous independent peer review process to ensure that the very best research gets funded.
Thanks for sharing that, Samantha. It's quite common we hear that people work in this sector because they've had a very direct personal experience and are therefore, deeply committed to the work. And so I'm very sorry to hear about how much this has touched your family directly. But no doubt you're turning that into an extraordinary impact for this disease that still impacts so many women across Australia. Let's dive in a little further, because I have some doctors in my family, an uncle who's an endocrinologist, and sometimes when he talks about his work, I get lost in the jargon. It's complex. Research is long, it's expensive, it's hit and miss. It takes years to bring that to clinical trials, as I understand it. Can you sort of talk through where are we on the journey to ideally coming up with is that still the goal, to create a cure for cancer, or is it early detection, based on the unique way the disease expresses itself? What is perhaps the most realistic way in which we can minimize the death rate? I'm just more from a clinical perspective. How is, obviously, there's peers around the world where their work is peer reviewed, and I imagine no one, as I understand, works in silos at this level of research. It'd just be great to have a bigger picture of perhaps who you're working with globally. How is breast cancer now considered? Is a cure possible, or is it not so much looking for a cure, but a different way in which those death rates can be minimized?
Yeah, so it's an incredibly complex question, and hopefully I can do it justice with a nice, simple answer. As I said to you, we've seen incredible progress over the last 30 years. I mean, you think back to when my auntie was diagnosed with the disease, there was no hope for her. And I can only imagine if she was diagnosed today, she might have been one of the 7 in 10 people that could be cured, because that's really what we're talking about. And over the past 30 or 40 years, we've seen incredible advances in detection, for example. So we've seen that increase in the number of new cases. And part of that reason why we're seeing an increase in the number of new cases is that we're just getting much better at detecting it earlier. And we now know the earlier breast cancer is detected, the better it can be treated. For women diagnosed with stage 1 and 2 breast cancer now, they've got 100% 5-year survival. 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. So we are making incredible advances all the time. But the real, I think, really getting to the nut of your question is the complexity around breast cancer. And I think what some people don't realize, and I remember the first sort of couple of years as a PhD student learning about breast cancer and just being overwhelmed by the detail and the complexity around the disease, is that breast cancer is not just one disease. Over the past sort of 10 to 20 years, with the advent of genomic technology, so understanding the human genome and the genes that regulate and are responsible for the development of breast cancer, what we've learned is breast cancer is not just one disease. It's actually thousands of different diseases that are unique to each individual patient. And so I think over the past sort of 10 or 20 years, one of the incredible aspects of breast cancer that I've observed is this shift from having a one pill fits all approach to having a personalized approach to treatment for each individual. And we're seeing that happen. Another incredible advance that we've seen over the past sort of 20 or 30 years is the advancement of immunotherapies. It's the understanding our immune systems play a huge role in human disease and the development of breast cancer, and also trying to fend off that breast cancer. And so over the past sort of decade or so, we've had the implementation of these immunotherapies that take off the brakes of the human immune system and can enable it to go off and fight the disease. And that's working incredibly well for melanoma. And a number of our researchers that we're funding at the moment are working on ways to make immunotherapy better for breast cancer. So if you put that all together, obviously we're dealing with a complex set of diseases. There's lots of different solutions that we can use to tackle the problem. But if you think of it like a big road and paving blocks, each discovery is another little paving block in the road towards zero deaths from breast cancer. And that is our clear, ambitious vision. We know research is the only way to get there. And we will continue to invest in world-class medical research until we get there.
Thank you for sharing that. I know there was kind of a complex question, and there's a lot of aspects to that. I'm curious, just to dive a little deeper, like unique to cancer research, are there some particular challenges that makes finding treatment and cure so complex?
I think it's really, I mean, there are indeed unique challenges with cancer research, as opposed to, say, something like the COVID pandemic, which was caused by a single pathogen, so a single infectious agent that we could create a vaccine and attack the severity of the disease with immunity. With cancer, it forms, sure, from a single cell or multiple clones of cells from tissues, but then becomes this complex mixture, like a fruit salad, for want of a better description, of a tumor cell that can have cells that grow a tumor, cells that move to the other parts of the organ, cells that modify your immune system. So that complexity around the disease, it's not caused by a single infectious agent. There can be multiple genes that contribute to cancer. I think it's that complexity of the disease process that makes it really difficult to treat.
And as far as National Breast Cancer Foundation is the peak organisation in Australia doing research. How does it work in terms of partnerships with other hospitals or other places around the world? And just if you could paint some of that picture, because as I know, most work is peer reviewed rigorously. At this level of research, could you talk to us a little bit about how that works?
Sure. So each and every year, so as far as National Breast Cancer Foundation goes, we invest in world-class research. And it's my role and my team's role to run our rigorous peer review grant system. So we ask national researchers who are working on their focus of zero deaths from breast cancer to apply to our annual research grant schemes. I then get national scientific and clinical experts, as well as patients, those that are directly affected by a diagnosis of breast cancer, to come and assess each one of those grants that are applied to us, each one of those grants that are submitted through our application process. And then we get our national scientific, consumer and clinical experts to assess each grant and allow us to judge which are the very best research projects that'll get us to zero deaths. Now, those researchers, as part of that assessment process, we ask researchers to tell us the scientific quality, for example, of the application. And to get to your question more clearer, we also want our researchers to collaborate. And so part of the assessment process is assessing the team capacity of the team. And that might not be just the team themselves at an individual institute. It might be if the team needs some sort of expertise to get the research done and it comes from an institute over in WA or an institute internationally, then we ask them to tell us how are they going to get the expertise together to be able to successfully complete the aims of the project. And that is part of our assessment process. We ensure that not only the scientific quality is absolutely world class, but we also ensure that the team is world class, that they can actually do the research that they set out to achieve. And from a researcher point of view, they can't work in silos, as you rightly pointed out earlier. We need the expertise of multiple individuals to solve these really complex problems towards zero deaths from breast cancer.
Is there a process to mitigate the risk of duplication of research, whether it be in Australia or parallel work happening in other parts of the world?
Yeah, so I mean, that really comes down to when you publish your papers. Obviously, papers are the currency of research, because in order to disseminate your research findings, you have to be able to publish it. And we have a peer review system in most of the world-class journals that people publish in. Part of their team capacity and track record, when we assess that at grant application stage, is showing that they can publish in really top tier journals internationally. And part of that process is obviously having peer reviewers that go and look at the research and make sure it isn't a duplication of previous research, and that it is actually new research, because it's unlikely to get published in the really top tier journals if it's a duplication of earlier research.
Do you think COVID, I mean, it sounds like it was the most extraordinary coordinated effort by doctors and scientists around the world. Has that perhaps set a new standard for what's possible in terms of coordination of research efforts, or will you say that was perhaps a unique response to a unique moment in history and we may not see that again?
I'd like to think that it's not a unique moment in history, and that if you think throughout history, most of the world's issues, either health or other issues, have been solved by scientists throughout the course of human history. COVID was pretty extraordinary, and it's fresh in our minds. And as I said to you before, a single agent, but there are a number of teams that worked on, and a number of governments that poured a whole bunch of money at a really big problem, and it was extraordinary. The effort that we put into that work to come out of the pandemic so successfully was extraordinary. But what I like to also talk about is the work that led up to the work that happened during the COVID pandemic, because the discoveries that were made 50 years prior also led to the development of mRNA vaccines. For example, RNA, the message that can transmit that virus in COVID, was actually discovered 50 years ago. So it's those discoveries that happen, those incremental discoveries over time, that ultimately lead to solutions to human disease. And I really do think that we can do this as well with breast cancer and also other cancers. It's a much more complex problem because it's not a single agent or a single pathogen that's causing the disease. There's a complex set of circumstances that can result in a cancer forming in the body. But it shouldn't detract. The challenge of the problem shouldn't detract us from the vision of zero deaths from breast cancer, because if we put all of our efforts in and our concerted efforts, collaborate and make sure we all work on the same problem, I do know that we can get to a zero deaths from breast cancer.
And of course, we're speaking today about research, but the human cost, the personal cost is, of course, enormous when a woman receives a diagnosis, and the impact on her life and her family. One of our partners is with Red Kite, who is supporting families when a child receives a diagnosis of cancer. And you know, the cost to people's lives, inability to sometimes work, to stop work immediately, to have to go to, obviously, the treatment process is, there's an enormous human toll, which is at the very pointy end of the work that you do. And so what would you say are some of the unique challenges and joys of your work?
So I really love the fact that my role, particularly now, is I get to oversee all of the fabulous research that we invest in each and every year. We have over 100 active research projects towards our vision of zero deaths, and they cross the entire breast cancer research continuum, from understanding prevention and risk, and that includes research that we've got going in Victoria at the moment, which is looking at new markers of breast cancer risk so that patients would be better informed about their risk management if they've got a high level of risk in their families, for example. Research into new detection methods, particularly for patients who mammography may not be as useful for example, those women under the age of 40. While breast cancer is a disease of the aging, generally, still around 1,000 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer under the age of 40 in Australia every year, and we need better detection methods, because we know the earlier breast cancer is detected, the better it can be treated, as well as the absolute extraordinary variety of new and improved treatments that we're investing in at the moment, from immunotherapy to different types of chemotherapy to different types of targeted therapy. There is some really extraordinary progress going on in understanding better ways of treating breast cancer, particularly for those hard to treat breast cancers. And then the joy in my job is that I don't just get to focus in now on the niche that I used to be working on. I get to see all of the different types of research that's going on, and our researchers report to us annually, so that we know that once they get their grant funding from us, they also have to tell us that they're achieving their original goals, and it's my team's role to make sure that those researchers are meeting their milestones each and every year, so that we can then report back to the public who have been so generous in their donations and say, guess what, you guys funded that project and look what we've achieved. We've achieved this publication, or we've now got a new treatment in the clinic, or we've got a new policy or practice change in the way that patients are treated. And that's really exciting for my role. I get to see all of the outcomes of the world-class research that we fund.
No, that's fantastic. And for businesses, giving back, in our case, we checked the other day, and I was really surprised because it's such a great result. So I Could Change businesses have raised over $463,000 and counting for the National Breast Cancer Foundation. And this is testament, obviously, to the issue itself, which touches the lives of so many women, and also, as you said, some men in Australia. The credibility and the respect that people have for the foundation. Can you share with us, because of course research is expensive, what impact does funding like this create for the organisation and for that journey towards looking to develop a cure where there are zero deaths from breast cancer?
It's extraordinary. And can I just say, over $463,000, it's extraordinary. So thank you very much, Jeremy, and all of your supporters for that incredible effort in raising funds. Every dollar goes towards world-class medical research. $463,000 could go towards one whole research project for up to 3 years. That could include the salary of an individual to perform the research over that 3-year period, and it could potentially develop the next revolutionary drug that we use against hard to treat breast cancer. It could give insights into making the immune system more useful against breast cancers in the body, or it could be used towards finding that next high level breast cancer risk gene that will give a patient who's got a family history of breast cancer resolve and understanding and how they can manage their risk in the future as well. So it's just extraordinary, the level of funding that you've raised so far, and every dollar counts, because ultimately we know the proof's in the pudding. Over the last 30 years, we've seen the mortality rate improve by 40%, over 40%, and that's because of research. So research will ultimately save lives.
So for any businesses on this call today, or those of you working for businesses, I Could Change is a way in which you can simply give back, whether it be through an online retail store, whether it be if you're working at a professional services firm. Businesses can now give back around their invoicing cadence. They can create beautiful emails around their impact and their commitment to helping change the lives for women across Australia. And I Could Change sits in the middle of that experience, where we make it easy and valuable for you to be able to give back and support extraordinary organisations like the National Breast Cancer Foundation. And especially as we move now towards, the cliche is true, you turn around and it's Christmas again. Suddenly we're into that quarter almost, and the year seems to speed up. And so what we're finding is that businesses increasingly realize they need to tell a bigger story beyond the products and their services. We're all aware that we're living in a fragile time, and we're wanting to buy from businesses that are committed to having that purpose. And so supporting National Breast Cancer Foundation, leading to Christmas, what a wonderful way to really communicate your commitment to people and the planet. Samantha, I think you've touched on this a number of times, but I'm wondering if you'd like to distill it into a few words about what keeps you going each day, and perhaps even what do you most look forward to each day in your work?
Thanks for that question. Well, what keeps me going each day, as you said, I've touched on it before, is not wanting anyone to go through what my family went through when my auntie was diagnosed with breast cancer. I have a daughter, I have a son, and I have a beautiful family, and I don't ever want them have to go through that as well. Every story that I hear from our consumer engagement committee, from our consumers that tell their stories to our donors as well, it touches me in my heart, and I keep going because I don't think anyone should have to suffer the burden of this disease, and I really am committed and absolutely resolved to the notion that research will save their lives eventually. We may not have all the answers right now, but I know science has the answers. And so if we continue to invest in world-class medical research, I know we will get to our vision of zero deaths. I don't want anyone to ever have to suffer what my family went through when my auntie was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Do you believe, given your understanding of the nature of the disease, it will be possible for us to one day find a cure?
I do. I think it's a big challenge. I don't think it's going to be as easy as the COVID pandemic, like we spoke about before, because it's not a single pathogen. There is a complexity to cancer, not just breast cancer, but there's a complexity to cancer that is unique to each and every individual. And as we learn more, we're unraveling further and further complexity. So I think it's a big challenge, but I think it's a goal that's worthy of its ambition, because I know we have the answer, but it's just a matter of investing enough money to to move towards our vision.
And in many years from now, when you perhaps sitting by the fire and you look back on your life, what do you believe you'll be most proud of?
I'm very proud of the work that I've done in breast cancer research, not just now as Director of Research Investment, overseeing incredible research projects, but also I thank the National Breast Cancer Foundation myself for investing in me and my research for 20 or so years. During the course of my research, I actually discovered a combination therapy for triple negative breast cancer that I know is starting to move its way into clinical trials. Now, even though I'm not involved in that research, I know that the work that I did has led to those discoveries and that further research, which hopefully will get into the patients. That's what I'll be proud of. I'll be proud of the work that I've done in breast cancer research. I'll be proud of the work that our researchers have done in breast cancer research, because I know that every discovery is probably another life that's been saved. The proof's in the pudding. We've seen the mortality rate decline over time. Imagine if we hadn't done anything. So I will be always proud that I know that the work that I've done and the work that our researchers have done have led to more individuals who have lived long and happy lives with their families.
Thank you for sharing that. It strikes me as this wicked challenge, isn't it? A complex challenge, and yet we have shown how when we unleash the potential of some of the greatest minds working collectively on these complex issues, we ultimately, it's perhaps what defines us as a species, our ability to cooperate, and our big brains, and our ability to ultimately work towards finding cures for some of the most sort of intractable and complex issues of our time.
100%.
Professor Samantha Oakes, thank you for joining us, Director of Research Investment at the National Breast Cancer Foundation. We're very proud to be supporting your work, and we hope to be increasingly able to deliver funds so that one day, as you say, we can move towards a world of zero deaths for breast cancer.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
And you. Thank you for joining us.